This took place in 2013, when I was around 12 years old. My mom had moved me and my siblings in with my grandparents because we couldn't afford the rent at the time. It wasn't a big deal, though. They had plenty of room, and I got to spend a lot of time making jewelry with my grandma, which, in my little eyes, was such a win that I didn't even realize we were struggling financially. Making jewelry became our pastime after school, and one of my favorite parts was the trips we'd take to Michael's to go get beads and other materials. For those unfamiliar, Michael's is a craft store similar to Hobby Lobby, and walking around inside is a little girl's dream come true if you love DIY projects. One day, in late fall, we ran out of wire for a bracelet I was making for my mom, so we headed to our local Michael's to get more. Since it was winter, it was already dark by 5 p.m. My grandma, who had vision problems and a bad hip, entrusted little me to run inside, grab the wire, and pay for it, just as we had done many times before. I was also stubbornly independent, so she wasn't too worried. She parked in the handicapped spot right in front of the store. The sun had already set, and the big storefront windows illuminated her car behind me as I walked inside. As I stood by the display at the front, entranced by some Christmas decor, a man walked in through the sliding doors. I noticed him immediately. He was tall, or at least to me he was, likely in his mid-30s. He also had dark hair and was dressed entirely in black. His clothes were a bit dirty, and I distinctly remember a big red D1 logo on his hoodie. He had his hands shoved into his pockets and walked briskly into the store, almost frantically. Our eyes met for a bit too long, and he continued deeper into the store. I was immediately weirded out, but I shrugged it off and went to find the wire. I found the spool of wire, but I got distracted in the toy section, and that's where I messed up. That was when I noticed him starting to follow me around, aisle after aisle. I'd be browsing, and he'd just appear at the other end, pretending to look at stuff. He was muttering to himself constantly, speaking out loud as if he was expecting a response, but never directly looking at me. As a kid, I didn't fully grasp what was happening, so I awkwardly walked away from him each time, pretending not to notice. My little brain reasoned that he wasn't following me, so I walked across the store to the wedding aisle to check out some things I'd seen when I first walked in. I figured there was no way he'd follow me there, but sure enough, while I was looking at the invitation cards, I got a spine-chilling feeling. I turned around, and there he was, right behind me. His back was to me, doing something. It looked like he was messing with something in his pants, doing something really vile to himself. I had never seen anything like that before, and the sunken-in eyes when he looked at me still haunt me to this day. It took me a minute to process what I had just seen, but once I did, I bolted it out of the store as fast as I could. I jumped into my grandma's car. I startled her with my sudden appearance. She asked what I'd gotten. Then I tried to explain what had just happened, and I saw him appear in the sliding door in front of us. The dread I felt in the moment was indescribable. He approached our car, obviously recognizing that I was with my grandma. He knocked on her window. I hadn't been able to explain myself in time before she cracked the window and asked him if everything was okay. The man gestured towards me, and with the same crazed stare, said something along the lines of, "She's a thief. She stole something from the store." I was mortified. He was trying to make her suspicious of me on top of everything else he had just put me through. Thankfully, my grandma had gotten the same bad vibes that I did, because she politely told him to back away and rolled up the window, locking the door. He suddenly started yanking at the door handle, then swung both of his arms up and started banging hard on the car's roof. It caused both of us to jump, and I started crying. My grandma slammed the car into reverse and peeled out of there. I've never seen her drive so fast. I don't remember much after that, just crying and holding a $17 spool of wire I hadn't paid for. We called the police as soon as we got home, and luckily they took it very seriously, immediately requesting the videotapes from the Michaels. A few weeks later, my grandma told me that they had found him. They mostly kept me out of the investigation, probably to avoid traumatizing the 12-year-old me further. She got the dent in her car fixed, and that was that. It wasn't until a few years later that my mom finally told me what happened to him. It turns out he already had 1 battery charge and 2 sexual assaults on his record, one involving a relative who was a minor. He had just gotten off work from the gas station across the street when he must have seen me walk into the Michaels alone. I don't know what would have happened if my grandma hadn't locked her door, or if she had been in the store with me, vulnerable to that man as well. When I was 17, I had just gotten my first car. One day, I drove my brother and myself to the dentist. While we were waiting in the lobby, I noticed someone had parked really badly next to my car. Since it was new, and I was pretty paranoid about getting it scratched or something, while my brother went in for his appointment, I decided to go move my car to a safer spot. After I parked in a new spot, I walked back to the office. Just before I could cross the parking lot to get inside, a minivan with super dark tinted windows had pulled up so close to me that it almost hit me. I thought it was strange, but I just walked around it. As I was heading to the door, I caught my reflection in the glass and noticed a guy getting out of the van and started to follow me. At first, I didn't think much of it and just started walking faster, but then he started running. That was when I realized, okay, this is actually happening. I started running too. I barely made it to the door before he could grab me. The door was glass, and I could see his reflection. He was reaching out, and inches away from me. He looked like a totally regular guy, wearing a button-up shirt and khakis, which made the whole thing even more surreal. I ran inside, and he didn't follow, probably because he didn't want to be seen. I was completely shocked, and kind of in denial about what just happened. It all went down so fast. I looked out the window and saw him holding a purple cloth in his hand. I have no idea what that was about. He looked around, then got back in his minivan and sped off. I told the receptionist, but I was still pretty shaken up and confused. The whole thing happened in less than a minute. I'm a model and was doing work for a catalog out of state. During our break, I stated that I was going to walk back to the hotel to get my charger, as it was only a block away. One of the video crew offered to walk with me, as he also had something he wanted to grab from the hotel. We got to the hotel with no problems, but I did leave alone. As soon as I walked out the door, a man approached me and said, "I saw you walking earlier." We had been in the hotel for about 20 minutes, which means he followed us to the hotel and had been waiting for me. He continued to walk with me and ask me all kinds of personal questions. I tried to politely get out of the conversation by telling him that I have to go to work and I couldn't talk right now. He continued to follow me and ask me questions the whole way back to where I was shooting. When I got there, He asked me to come swimming in the river with him. I told him that I couldn't because I have to work. I was too afraid to be stern or tell him to F off because I've heard of so many stories of men like this becoming violent in this situation. I tried to open the door to the building because he followed me and was standing right behind me. That was when I started feeling really nervous. The door was locked. I started running around to every door, trying desperately to get inside, and he followed me to every door. They were all locked, and now I'm really in a panic. A car with 2 girls inside pulled over and called me to come to their car. I ran over, and he immediately booked it down the street and disappeared. The girls told me that they saw what happened and asked if I needed a ride. I explained I just needed to call someone to get inside, and that it seemed that he was gone now. I got on the phone with the other model, and she was on her way to open the door. I told the girls I was okay now. He was gone and someone was on their way. As soon as the girls drove away, the man appeared from around the corner on the street he left down. He had been watching and waiting for them to leave. He was walking very fast towards me. I ran up the stairs and started banging on the door, desperate to get in. He started coming up the stairs after me, and when the door finally opened, I closed it fast behind me. Needless to say, I was shaken. I never really feel safe when I walk anywhere now, no matter how short the distance is. Even walking across a parking lot is a stressful experience.